Well, hello, everybody. It says we're live, and I have to trust what the computer tells me to think. So, welcome to another week of Self-Publishing Insiders, the live stream provided to you by Draft Digital. And you may be listening to this as our podcast, Self-Publishing Insiders. And if you are, welcome to you as well. You don't get to ask questions live, though. So, if you want to be able to ask questions live, what you got to do is tune into these things every Thursday at noon Central on Facebook or YouTube. And you can find it if you go to dddlive.com. So now that you've been appropriately shamed for not being here live, welcome Mark Leslie Lefebvre, who is our resident expert on the self-publishing industry. You're the industry insight guy, Mark.
Well, I'm just relying on the work of a lot of really, really smart people at Draft Digital who are creating these amazing reports, but doing a lot of analytics, digesting tens of thousands of lines of data.
Yeah.
Which, that's so much fun. But taking a look at it, breaking it down and trying to understand, considering the fact that between Smashwords, Draft Digital, and the Smashwords store and all the distributors, like all of the retailers and libraries that we distribute to, when we collect this data back in, we're looking at a pretty authoritative look at the indie publishing industry. Nobody else has the kind of data. So I thought it would be really important. I know, Kevin, you and I have talked about this a lot. It's really important to continue that great work that Mark Coker started, doing industry insider reports. And he would always do a great year-end summary, but trying to take some of that data a little bit closer to real time. So Q1 of 2022, breaking it down, and trying to identify trends so we can help authors make more informed decisions about their own writing businesses. So I'm just so thrilled that we have the ability to do this now.
I know this is something, and you and I have talked about this before. Like, this is something that we've both really wanted for the publishing industry, for the what used to be called the self-publishing industry, but now we just call the publishing industry.
Yeah.
That's my ongoing quest right now. Is I like to tell people that, it used to be that there was there's publishing and then there's self-publishing, but now it's like there's publishing and then there's traditional publishing.
Yeah, but one of the things that let's along those same lines is Draft Digital is a tool that authors who are traditionally published can leverage, and there are authors who leverage it where they work with a publisher. And they maybe sell rights to specific countries, North American rights only, for example, to a major publisher.
Right.
And then they leverage Draft Digital to publish not in North America, but everywhere else. So it's not just a tool for self-published authors. It's a tool for authors. Never mind, last week's Books to Read webinar as well as a reminder that it doesn't matter how your books are published, you can still use the free Books to Read tools.
Right.
And I think the whole Draft Digital ecosystem is meant to be tools for writers to help them get back to writing as much as possible, right?
Exactly. Yeah, we're trying to take all the burden of the distribution and the other pesky aspects of a writing business off your shoulders, so that you are free to do this. So before we jump right into the content of the day, I do want to tell everybody I've been sharing the links in the comments, but if you are not seeing those, you can go to ddd.tips/insight to see not just the post for today's show, but the past one that we did. There's only been a couple of these so far. We're going to do these like once a quarter to kind of give you an insight into how this is going. Here's our advantage, by the way. We are now officially the largest distributor of self-published authors and books and small publishers on the planet. Like, we are it. Like, we are that big now. So
I hear there's one starting on a satellite station that might get close one day.
A satellite station?
Oh, well, the largest one that's off this planet.
Off this planet. So, we may actually be the largest publisher on the International Space Station at this point. I'm not sure. We're going to check into it. But if you go to ddd.tips/insight, that's where you're going to find these. So if you're listening to this in the future, the Q1 of 2022 may be your past and may not be relevant to you any longer, but you can find whatever the current one is at that site, ddd.tips/insight. So, Mark, now we have Now, don't go wandering away on me, man.
The garbage truck was coming. I had to close the window.
It's like suddenly leaving me just to fend for myself. Now, this went live this morning around 8 a.m. Central. So I don't think most people have had an opportunity to read through it yet. I've read through it. Am impressed as always. But why don't you start us off? I know the very first thing that you start talking about here is actually our top selling genres for Q1 of 2022.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight. Now we all know romance is the number one genre because romance readers are so voracious. You know,
Everybody
one
loves
book a day
romance.
is not enough for many voracious romance readers, right?
Yeah.
So that's obviously the number one. But what we did is a breakdown, and again, this is not based on unit sales. Now I'm going to borrow this line from Erin Wright of the Wide for the Win movement and group, and she says, "Bank over rank." Because you can't earn a living as an author off of the ego feed of seeing a number one ranking because you sold a lot of units. You need to kind of, especially if your goal as an author is to earn a living. That's why we sorted this by revenue rather than units. So we have obviously romance number one, fantasy number two, mystery and detective number three, erotica number four, action and adventure number five, science fiction number six, women's fiction number seven, crime fiction number eight, LGBT Q plus, but the BISAC code is LGBT. Is the next one. Then interestingly enough, it's a lot of the genre fiction that is dominating indie author sales. But health and fitness, diet and nutrition in Q1 was actually in that top ranking area, just below LGBTQ plus, and then you had fiction, family life, fiction, coming of age, and so those were the top by revenue, the top genres for Q1. Now I'm speculating, of course, and I didn't write this in the article, that potentially diet and revenue always has a bit of an uptick at the beginning of the year, as we all have these goals and dreams.
True.
I'm going to exercise more, I'm going to eat properly, all those things. But obviously there's some indie authors who have published some books. A good friend of ours, Roland Denzel, has some great evergreen books on healthy lifestyle as well. And indie, I believe they're in indie published now. I think they may have originally been with the publisher, but I'm
not going to shame myself by saying anything, because I know he's got some indie published stuff, and I know he's still got some
trad pub stuff. So he's got a bit of both, but obviously that could be one of the reasons. So we may see, who knows, we may see diet and nutrition in Q2 results, but it's interesting to see it's not always just genre fiction. And for me, it's really important, because if you're an author who doesn't write romance fiction, you go, well, I guess I'm out of luck. I want authors to recognize that. I mean, and again, there's thousands of BISAC categories. We only highlighted the very top of the top. We didn't go into, here's the order ranked by 3,000 different BISAC codes, right? So, for example, when I say romance, it's romance and all the subcategories of romance.
Which I believe you break down in the post as well.
A little bit more. I broke it down a little bit more, but we can't get into the entire list.
This is only a 45-minute show. So.
Exactly.
But I mean, we could look at some of the, we could take a look at the top two or three. I mean, it's interesting to me, the phrase contemporary romance. What does that mean to you when you hear that? What does that mean?
So contemporary romance, I'm not, not trying to insult or anything, but it's just sort of like generic romance of maybe the Danielle Steele style. I'm using big name authors to sort of illustrate it for people who are listening to it.
It's the big bucket,
set in modern times. It's contemporary. It's a classic love story, as opposed to suspense, which is a combination. Like, I love romantic suspense novels because they have two things I love. I love love stories, but I also really love suspense and thrillers. And so it combines that action, suspense, thrillers with romance. And so then you get into obviously new adult romance. So it's, of a certain age, a little bit beyond YA. And then you get into historical and Regency, which of course you're probably seeing side effect of Diana Gabaldon's Outlander, or Bridgerton or something like that. So you're seeing that the thirst in the community for that kind of historical romance is growing as well. And then, I mean, there's always the billionaire romance that has been popular since since that gray character in 50 Shades, right?
Yes.
That
Yeah.
from that point on, billionaire romance has just become its own wonderful subgenre for so many indie authors.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you call out that the second highest overall category is fantasy.
Yeah.
Which may be related to this what you were just saying, that we've got all this fantasy fiction coming at us from film and TV. Do you think that's what's driving that, or is there? I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a part of me that also thinks that there's a demand for that because it is so escapist, and we could really use that right about now.
We really could, yeah. Well, yeah, you have. I mean, you do have the richness of such great shows or movies that still, Harry Potter and the Lord of the Rings and
Yeah.
Hobbit and all of those, right? And they were movies, so they brought them to a lot more people than just readers. And then, of course, you get Game of Thrones,
Right.
popular television series, fantasy.
Coming up.
Although erotica and romance and horror, all the things, right? Involved in there. But here's the other thing: when you think about fantasy, so paranormal romance is also among the top. But then when you look at fantasy, you're also getting a lot of paranormal, and so paranormal as opposed to epic fantasy. So paranormal was the number one category. Meaning it's not the Tolkien fantasy so much, although that is popular. The Tolkien, the epic is up higher level. Dark fantasy is one that was the fourth highest. And dark fantasy was traditionally, as a horror author, a lot of horror authors said, well, we're not going to use the horror label because that's like a label we don't want.
Yeah.
We'll call it dark fantasy because that's very literary and very highbrow. It's really just horror.
Yeah.
So you have... of a paranormal and urban fantasy. I mean, I write paranormal urban fantasy thrillers as well, so I'm guilty of writing in this genre. So happy to, all half dozen of my sales contributed to this. But then you get romantic fantasy as well, which is interesting. And then at the very, very so it's kind of interesting when you look at the BISAC categories, because there's 3,600 different subject classifications.
Yeah.
You've got urban fantasy, but then you've got contemporary fantasy. So what's the difference? Well, there's contemporary fantasy like urban, but it's not set in an urban setting, and it's more of a rural setting, but it's modern. Like that's the interesting. Although I guess when you think about urban fantasy, it could potentially be historical urban fantasy.
That's true. Someone made that argument to me in another podcast that just because it's urban doesn't mean it's contemporary.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
it could be. And it's like, is it Victorian urban?
Yeah, exactly. So, then there's the country music side, the Tim Urban fantasy. Moving on very quickly.
That's a very niche subgenre.
Did I get that right? I don't even know if I got that right. I may have I don't know.
Okay, I got the joke you were shooting.
So there's it's disconcerting to me that I do not see thrillers on the top list. But I do see mystery and detective and action and adventure, which, my books do fall into those categories.
Yeah.
That would probably highlight the necessity to make sure your book is pick your top 3 genres, right?
Yeah. Well, it's a subgenre as well, right? Those are really, really important. And so I think that's an interesting thing, because when you look at merchandising lists on the major retailers that we play with all the time, they'll often mix thrillers and mystery and crime, depending on what geo location they're in. They may mix them together in the same categories. There's still a lot of dominance for thrillers. Not that there's not a lot of great thrillers being published and selling well in the indie author community.
Right.
But I mean, I just finished reading a traditionally published thriller from a Canadian friend of mine, published by Simon & Schuster, and it's been dominating the Canadian bestseller list since the book came out over a month ago.
Wow.
And so obviously there's the the girl who thrillers that are that sort of thing. Whether she was on a train, in a house across the street, drinking wine, whatever the case was, that's been a popular thing in that genre.
Yeah, there's like a parody series on Netflix right now that's like
It's
girl who
classic.
saw the girl across the street who was murdered by the girl who whatever, you know,
from the girl in the window. Yeah, it's actually it's a great series with Kristen Bell.
Yes.
She is wonderful.
I haven't watched it yet, but so you kind of brought something, a similar idea up. So I'm going to post this comment real quick. The lady writes on YouTube, says, "I was surprised to see science fiction and fantasy separate. Thank you for doing that. Not everyone does."
Yeah,
That's a long running kind of complaint from like bookstores, you know?
yeah. So I think you got to remember. So, and I started in bookstores back before the big box stores existed. So typically, a typical bookstore would maybe have 5,000 to 10,000 titles and have very, very limited retail space.
Yeah.
Therefore, they had fiction, romance, maybe westerns, and then they would just take science fiction and fantasy and put anything that was speculative in nature, even horror sometimes, and just throw it all in there.
Yeah.
And of course, the diehard fans who go, "Well, I love fantasy or epic fantasy, but I don't read science fiction."
Right.
You know, and then even within that, you say, "Well, I only read military science fiction, or I only read near future science fiction, or I only read dystopian." So there's so much subtlety in subgenres that were not possible until the big box stores came out, because then there was enough retail space to actually properly divide science fiction and fantasy properly, and then do the subcategories. But then online book selling, of course, made that even better, because you didn't have to worry about, well, I have one copy of the book. What shelf is it going on in the store?
Yeah.
You know, it's virtual shelves, so you can be in multiple categories at the same time. And so I really think that online book selling helped that. So thank you so much, the lady writes, but we really have to thank the trends of technology in the industry that actually allow us as consumers to find the books we want to read.
Right.
And of course, just as importantly on our end as authors, allow us to place those books in those specific subcategories and not just go, yeah, sci-fi, fantasy, it's all the same.
Yeah, right? Exactly. And I should point out that we have that nifty reading list tool that you can separate fantasy and sci-fi as much as you want on, if you want to present people with a reading list.
Was that like a webinar last week or something?
I think there may have been a webinar about it. So if you didn't see that, by the way, you can find that on our blog at draftdigital.com/blog. You can just search for that and find just search webinar, and you get to see the whole series. So I'm looking at the section here on your post labeled Global Growth. It has nice nifty charts. Why don't I know the people listening aren't going to be able to really they can't just quite visualize these charts. You can if they go to the post, but can you kind of run through this for us?
Picture this. There, I'll get you started. So what I did is I took a look at the top selling territories for 2019. I went back a few years prior to the pandemic. And then I looked at 2022. One of the reasons I did this is I just got access to the report, and so I grabbed the 2022 data, and then the other data I had was run in 2020 for 2019. I didn't have time when I was writing this report to go back and look at all the years, so I thought, well, that gives us enough of a distinction. But what we did see when you actually look at this is it's a slow change. One of the key things we saw is that in 2019. The U.S. was a larger percentage of sales. So what happened is they went from 8 point, what was it? Sorry, I can't even see the data in front of me. The U.S. sales was initially a slightly larger percentage, and it's lower. Not to say that U.S. sales are down, because they're not. They are still growing. We're seeing growth. But as a percentage of overall sales, they're a smaller percentage. What does that mean? Global growth. As we all know, there's a lot. The adoption of ebook selling is still limited, right? Still, most people who read still read print books, and so particularly in Europe and across Europe and overseas, not in the UK so much. You're having countries that haven't yet fully adopted. Well, even in the US and the UK, we haven't fully adopted ebook reading. We're still at the cutting edge, at the early days of that. For anyone who thinks those glory days of ebook selling are over, they're not.
Right.
They've only just begun. I may break into song, but I think when you think about this global growth, there's just increases more and more opportunities, because when you think about, well, in the US, there's one dominant player that shall not be named, some river place, right? There's this dominant player in an existing market that people think is done and is a write-off. And that's not the case, although they will probably always maintain a dominance in the US and the UK. But there are other countries, or Kobo, for example, was one of the companies that really took the reins and said, hey, the US has spoken for it. Let's go after all of these partners and all these other territories to see if we can grow. And so
Right.
what you're seeing is the combination of Kobo and Apple and Google Play, you're seeing growth across other territories. Another reason why we're seeing this particular growth is we recently, and by recently in the last year, signed BorrowBox. And BorrowBox, for any author listening who's not familiar, is BorrowBox is a distributor, a wholesale distributor to libraries in
Yeah.
Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, and the UK. So they're known to people in those territories. But here in North America, we go, well, I've heard of Overdrive, I've heard of Baker and Taylor, but I haven't heard too many of the other ones, right? So BorrowBox is someone we added, and obviously we've seen global growth because we added a global
Yeah.
retailer or a global wholesaler who's not available in North America. So of course we're going to see growth in those areas too.
Yeah. I think we have an opportunity there, by the way, as we are getting books into libraries in Australia. We should be able to monitor and see if we're seeing actual sales growth on platforms in that region,
Yeah.
to see if how effective library distribution is for encouraging sales outside of that platform.
Yeah.
What do you think of that idea?
Oh, for
Hard,
sure.
right?
I'm all for that. And I even know two of our partners, two
Yeah.
of our library partners are very, very interested in spotlighting Australian authors for Australian libraries. So if you're listening, you should contact us and say, hey, I'm an Australian author. And
Yeah.
we'll make sure that you're distributing your books to those library platforms, so then we can send your name and your titles over to those partners and say, hey, tell your libraries about this awesome author. They should really pay more attention. And I'm in a Canadian country, and I know that's something we take a lot of pride in. And so it's like the Canadian author flag is really important to retailers and libraries here in Canada. There's often sections. Indigo, our largest, kind of like a Barnes and Noble of Canada, large
Yeah.
chain bookstore, often has the slogan used to be "The world needs more Canada," and they often have authors from the north or whatever to try and spotlight Canadian talent.
Yeah.
And so I know that as we work with partners who are looking to spotlight talent in their region, that's really important. Viblio, for example, in France, they're huge in France. So if you're an author from France and you're looking for opportunities, let us know. Maybe we can just point out your books to Viblio as well. Because
Yeah.
again, there's that hometown pride that people can often take as as retailers, librarians, etc.
Right. Yeah. The world does need more Canada. We have a question. Actually, it is a question. I might as well pop it up at this point. William Brinkman asks, is urban fantasy counted as fantasy on your list?
Yes, William, that's a great question. So at the high level, when I say fantasy, it's all of the 38 or 40 subcategories of fantasy, and
Yeah.
urban fantasy is one of them, as is contemporary, as
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
Arthurian, as is paranormal, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, great question though. Thanks for asking, William.
Yes. Okay. So now moving back to your charts, I guess. I keep
My
I keep
charts.
grabbing into. So you start talking about trends that we should pay attention to. What are
Yeah.
those? And this is not, we're not advising people now go out and write books to these genres because that's what's going to be hot. This
Yeah.
is more like these are the things that you may want to
Yeah.
keep in mind as you write.
Yeah. So I mean, that's one of the reasons why we're just looking at, hey, there's still growth globally. There's still opportunities for you as authors. Here are the genres that are selling really, really well. Here are the breakdown of some of the subgenres, just so you can understand a little bit more about it.
Yeah.
I'm more of a fan. I've been in the industry since 1992, and I know that trends will come and go. I think one of the key things, yes, writing the market is important, or at least understanding the market you're writing to is critical. That's critical. Actually writing to market, especially if it's something you don't believe in, may not be something you can sustain for a long time as a writer. You may be able to do it, but it may not feel good. So
Yeah.
I always vote for, write the stories that you're passionate to tell, write the stories that you want to tell. If you're passionate of writing this genre, and you see that this genre is doing really, really well, maybe this is a focus right now. But I'm not saying to completely say, well, like for example, I'm not gonna, although I did just co-author a romance novel, but I'm not gonna go and write romance because that's popular, more popular than the genre I normally write in. So I'm not suggesting you do that, but it's good to pay attention to the trends so you understand what's going on. Now, one trend I want authors to be completely aware of, and this, Kevin, is based not only on data that we've seen, that we've been able to measure, but just in interactions that I know that you and Dan and myself and other members of the Draft Digital team have had in conversations with other authors through in-person and virtual networking that we've done. And also paying attention to, because we often do pay attention to the trends and the reports about the traditional publishing industry, because even though we are a self-publishing platform, we need to understand where we fit within the greater platform so we can help authors understand that. And the one thing that we've seen, and we've recognized this is we're at a point in time in our history where 2 years ago, March of 2020, we were so thrilled to see triple-digit ebook growth, particularly into the library market, as people were locking down, they were shutting themselves in and isolating and not able to go and socialize with other people, and they also couldn't get into bookstores, and it's difficult because a physical book might come with a virus. Ironically, they were discovering the joy of ebook reading, so ebook sales just went through the roof. We're starting to normalize and stabilize after that growth. But what we're seeing is almost like a rebound effect. And I kind of equate it for two reasons. Right now in the world, and in particular in North America, most of the lockdowns and legislations and mask mandates and all of those things have been lifted.
Yeah.
And for the first time in 2 years, people are so excited that they can get and go and mingle in groups, in crowds. Last night was my son's high school graduation. This is the first graduation ceremony they've had since 2019 in a giant room with a lot of people, as opposed to the virtual ceremony. So people are out and about, especially here in North America. It's spring. Yay, we get to go out. Well, not where you live, but where I live. I'm so excited that I don't have to put on a jacket and my galoshes and my toque and all the things to get outside. I can just go outside quickly and easily. And so reading, not as many people are buying, not as many people are reading. So if you were doing something as an author that was working really, really well in January and February, for example, and you did the exact same thing, and you ran a promotion with one of the great third party like the BookBubs or the Written Word Media, Bargain Booksy, Free Booksy, any of those sites out there that you're running great promos on, and you run a similar promo and it doesn't work, anytime between April and now, chances are you didn't do anything wrong. And I want authors to understand that. Chances are it's just a side effect of the state of the world right now, and the fact that very few people, or fewer people, are buying books as they were just a few months ago. And so we're seeing that trend across the industry. You're even seeing reports from the traditional side of things. So it's not you. I mean, it could be you, but it's not something to think about. Well, it worked before. Why isn't it working now?
Yeah.
I would advise authors, if you're cautious and worried about overspending on ads that you're running and stuff like that, instead of doubling down and investing more, maybe just hold back a little bit. Let's wait until we get to midsummer, and hopefully we're going to get more into the, hey, I'm on vacation, I want a beach read, I want to just enjoy myself, or as we're getting closer to the end of the year, I want to learn. It's time. Now it's time. 6 months into the year, okay, now it's time for me to do those things I thought I was going to do in January. I still have time. So I want people to be aware of those trends, so they're not blaming themselves. Because one of the things, you know this, Kevin, we blame ourselves as authors. We have imposter syndrome. We think, oh, I must have done something wrong. I must have annoyed my readers or whatever. And that's not the case at all. For the most part, it's most likely an industry trend, and you're just suffering through that right now.
Yeah. And like you said, everybody, every publisher, traditional or otherwise, is kind of dealing with that same thing. So too bad we don't have like a magic bullet to get around that, but
no, I've been looking.
Maybe one day. So this is new. This is somewhat new for us, but it's something we're going to start leaning into, and I'm excited about it. I know you're excited about it. We got our brand new promotions. What's her official title?
Promotions coordinator, Megan Spann. She is awesome.
Yeah,
and so excited. She started with us, I guess, a month ago, right?
Yeah. took over for somebody.
From some really lovely
lady.
lady that you may know. But yeah, Kara was awesome.
Yeah.
I was worried, like, how do you replace someone as awesome as Karen? But oh my God,
The
Megan.
problem I have.
Yeah. So
I tell that to myself all the time. How do I replace someone as awesome as Kara? I guess I better keep her.
you got to keep her. but Megan has been and it was great that Megan and Kara got to work alongside one another for a little while, and Kara did some great training, as Kara had just been learning some new reports post merger of pulling data from the Smashwords system and then also the draft to digital system. And so what Megan's been doing is being able to combine these reports. So there's been some great reports that Smashwords has historically always sent to Romantic Daily Times, sending a bestseller report to Publishers Weekly as well, the industry of indie bestsellers. And now we can merge that data. So it's sales from all of the distributed platforms that Smashwords goes to, libraries and retailers, all of this distributed platforms that Draft to Digital goes to, library and retailers, plus sales on the Smashwords store, where you make 85% as an author if you sell through the Smashwords store. And don't worry, we're going to be leveraging that to your benefit, authors, in the coming.
We're going to make that easier for everybody.
Yeah, make it easier to earn more just by pushing a button. And again, we get to control the merchandising, so we'll be able to offer way more opportunities for authors there. But taking all of that combined data and merging it, and so this is an April bestsellers report that we weren't able to run until the end of May, and the reason is because we don't get all the reports back from all the places right away. So we wanted to wait until we had, I think it's like the 25th of May was when Megan could finally pull all the data, because all of them had been reported. And then we pulled the data, she mashed it all together, sent the report off to Publishers Weekly, and then I took some of that data and again, we sorted this by revenue, not unit sales, again because we wanted to highlight bank over rank as important. Now there's a pretty close correlation between unit sales and revenue, although there are some cases where there are ones where the sales, it might have been maybe number 28 on the list in terms of unit sales, but it was number 25 in terms of revenue. So there is that difference there. What we did is we wanted to share the bestseller list, and so Megan is in the process today, because we just posted this live, of emailing and congratulating the authors, because what we want to do is a couple things. I mean, authors work in isolation, they're always working so hard, they may not even be aware that they're a bestseller. And so what we did is we're messaging them and saying, hey, congratulations, you're one of the top 25 best-selling authors from April. And we'll be doing this every month. Now, we're only going to be doing the quarterly breakdown like you and I are doing right now and talking about it. But every month we're going to be posting the top 25. And what we did with the image here is we wanted the top 10, because I was just trying to get a nice round number. There are several authors you may notice in the bestseller list who are repeated. They're obviously, for example, Lexi Tim's The Bunkmate, which is the Roommate's Wanted series number 2, is the third best-selling book. But then Lexi Tim's fifth best-selling Tim's is another one by Lexi Tim's. And so Elle Kennedy as well appears multiple times on the list. So what we wanted to do here, just to kind of spotlight more authors and give more authors a spot in the sun, is we picked the top one from each of the authors. And then if that author appeared again, what we did is, in the image at least, we wanted to show 10 different authors, as opposed to showing 3 of the authors like 4 times or something. So again, it's just a chance for us to try and spotlight and show some really, really great sales that we're seeing across the board. So it's not just one particular retailer. This is across, amalgamated from multiple retailers. And even in some cases, the titles are doing okay on retailers, but where they're really knocking it out of the park is in the library market, right? So this is a really great start to sharing some of the bestsellers that we're seeing to try to spotlight authors. You may notice a trend here. Kevin, do you notice a trend of just judging the books by the covers there? Do you see a trend?
Is it bare-chestedness?
Well, apart from that,
there's only a couple of those actually this time, but these are mostly, this is all romance, right?
Mostly romance. Now, Alex Cava, actually, you see that looks more like action thriller.
That seems like suspense or something.
Suspense. And then And yeah, again, you're obviously seeing a certain style of romance as well. But
Yeah.
again, just taking and again, we're just quickly judging them by the covers, but you can see, and that's why we shared the genre as well.
Yeah.
So you're seeing a lot of romances dominating, but women's fiction. So Rachel Hannah, The Beach, for example, that's women's fiction.
Yeah.
And so even though when you looked at that category of women's fiction, it was further down on the overall list for Q1, in the top 25 titles, she's still there. She's got a
Yeah.
title there. So just because that genre that we talked about earlier isn't number one or isn't at the top of the list does not mean this is not something that can be very lucrative
Yeah.
for an author. And again, just think about how many different readers get to enjoy some of this fiction.
Yeah, exactly. This is cool. Yeah, and we're going to be kind of pushing that out there and shouting out for these authors to congratulate them on our list. And over time, this is going to grow. I think one day it is not inconceivable that people will forget all about that whole New York Times list and only care about the D2D bestseller list.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to start putting D2D bestseller on all my books.
Well, I think maybe we need to make a little badge for authors and give it to them and say you're a top selling D2D author.
We should do that.
Here you go.
Yeah. Everybody in the comments, you tell us if you were if you made that D2D bestseller list, would you want to display your badge on your website or your book cover or whatever? Let us know in the comments. Speaking of comments, we got a lot of these are about print. Let's pop this one up. I think this was already answered by some of our folks in the comments, but Lord, I won't try that name. Sorry. Is Amazon?
We'll call you C.
CM asks, is Amazon the only partner of D2D for print?
No.
And the answer is no. We actually use we have an expanded distribution that can get you to bookstores planet wide. Really, I mean, there's no serious limit to where your book can show up. But we do distribute to Amazon. But you don't even have to distribute to Amazon. You can actually turn Amazon off as one of the distribution channels for your print book if you'd like. So, right? Is that incorrect? You're shaking your head.
Correct. No, you can't.
You can't. I thought you could select whoever you wanted.
Well, for ebooks, yes.
For ebooks.
For print. No.
Well, then I'd like my comments stricken from the record.
I'm just going to take out the little Men in Black thing and flash it to everyone's ears.
All right. Well, no, it's good. This is good because I was under the impression that you could, but that's all right. To being proven wrong
what happens,
live
though,
on air.
To explain it is if you've published directly to Amazon through KDP.
Yeah.
And you're using the exact same ISBN that maybe you own, it's on Amazon directly. And then if you publish it through D2D print, what'll happen is it'll get sent to Amazon, but Amazon will ignore it because they go, we got it. We don't, need it, got it. They're like, no, we don't want this. We already have it. So we're good.
Yeah.
And they prefer themselves anyways.
Right.
Because they make more money. They don't have to split with the distributor.
Maybe that's why I was confused because
so
you can turn it off on Amazon.
Yeah, it's going to Amazon, but it's not getting to Amazon because of that reason. But there's no way to deselect Amazon as a distribution platform. You're thinking about the old system.
Okay, that's probably it. But I know that on KDP print on Amazon, you can turn off expanded distribution.
And you should never turn it on in the first place.
You should never turn that on. And just use us for expanded distribution. We get more places anyway. But that may be what I was thinking about.
That maybe you were thinking about that. Yeah.
Or not. That's giving me way too much credit. Let's not give me that much credit. So in this question is related to that too. Everybody wants to know about D2D print today. So 2 questions. This is question number 1. The problem I'm having is, and maybe others are having, is Amazon either not listing the print books or saying they are out of print. See, we were just talking about this.
Yeah.
Is a happy resolution anytime soon in the cards? So since that's not under our control, we can't. Yeah.
Although I do know over time it stabilizes, it normalizes.
Yeah.
When your book first goes live, it's a week or 2 or even longer where it looks unavailable, and that's just Amazon doing their weird stuff where they're trying to force you to want to publish directly to them or whatever whatever ingenious thing that they're trying to do to drive you away from using distributors and owning the market.
Yeah.
But it does normalize over time, because I do have that with a number of my books, and I'm always upset when they first go live and
Yeah.
they look, oh, it's going to take 16 to 29 weeks to get the book.
Yeah,
And
it's
then
ridiculous.
over
Yeah.
time, and here's what happens, because Amazon is very customer centric, is once the book gets printed and it gets distributed, it's usually the turnaround's relatively quick. And then once Amazon has the actual data
Yeah.
that shows that it's going to be there in 1 to 2 days, or whatever the case is, it normalizes, but it does take some time. So Michael, I do understand your frustration there.
Yeah, my gripe with that is that seeing that number, it's going to take 6 months to deliver, that can discourage sales. And so
It does, yeah.
yeah, but whatever. All right, Michael's follow-up question was, if a bookstore asks me how to order print copies, what do I tell them?
You can tell them oftentimes, because it will, if it's coming through D2D print, it will be non-returnable, which means they'll want to order it in only if they believe they're going to be able to sell it, and because they're not going to be able to return it back to the wholesaler.
Yeah.
But it should be available on their online, like for special order and stuff like that. I know even there's indie bookstores here in Canada in town that I love to support, and I know people can go to their website and order the book, and they'll order it in for you.
Yeah.
They'll order it in for any customer.
Yeah.
But they're not likely to want to stock the books, because the way bookstores operate, the business of bookstores, is they need the ability to be able to return them to the publisher for a credit. And with these print-on-demand titles, they are currently default set to non-returnable. And so that option kind of goes away unless you have a great relationship with a bookstore and they either want to take them directly from you on consignment, or they're willing to order them through the wholesaler. Through they're available through Ingram wholesale distribution, which is the world's largest wholesaler of print books. Most bookstores in the English-speaking world have access to Ingram and use them regularly.
Yeah.
And they may want to stock them to support you. But again, Michael, there's no easy answer to that, because we're talking about different people who run their businesses different ways, and we can't state how they're going to run their business. They make those decisions themselves. But key thing you can do is have a really solid relationship with your local bookstore. And maybe that solid relationship leads to them being willing to be flexible.
I do recommend, I use that consignment model personally, where I'll go to a bookstore and offer to bring them some copies and check back in with them, and, do the inventory of it, and what's great about that is they can still order additional books. So if the thing sells out and people are still interested, they can go ahead and order the book. But it's a good way to kind of whet the appetite a little.
Exactly.
All right.
Here's your free sample.
Yeah, exactly. That's basically what it is. You take all the risk, but that's kind of our shtick anyway, right? As indie authors, we're taking all the risks, but we also get all the rewards. Yeah. So, last question I have bookmarked at the moment, and I'll go searching for some more. But Tom Ray asks, do the big guys use an AI to read the work and classify it in their own opinion? Not to my knowledge.
Not that I'm aware of. The big guys, talking about the big publishers, is that what you mean? Like the
That's what I
large
think he
publishers?
Means. Yeah, or
no,
Amazon.
They have editors.
I'm guessing he means like Amazon and others to categorize it.
Because
they are choosing. Like Amazon in particular is pretty bad about it. I'm only guessing, Tom, so you fill us in if I'm wrong on this. But Amazon, you'll put your book up and you'll choose your BISACs, but it'll show up in like 10 other categories based on keywords and other things. I've heard that's
not AI reading the book. Although that the technology does exist, right? The technology to read books like that, and our good friend Alexandra Torre, right? She's spearheaded a company that what's it called, Marlow, that can actually read a book and sort of classify the category based on the words and stuff like that. But we believe, it seems like they use the metadata, and part of the metadata is the keywords as well. So it's the BISAC codes you put in, plus potentially, where in Amazon's case, where they also read the keywords to reclassify it. And you can also message them if you're publishing to Amazon directly. You can message them and ask to be added to a bunch of other categories, because they only give you 2.
Yeah, that's true. We're getting some answers on my request to if people want to do the badge. We got at least a couple here. So DL White wants one. The lady writes, says a badge would be great. DL White, yes, I need a badge. So
we got to get on that then.
We're gonna have to. Yeah, I'm sure. I think there may be a certain very talented graphic designer. Actually,
yeah.
she didn't have internet access today, so she may not be watching right now.
But... so we can volunteer for this since she can't object.
But I do know that our newest member of the marketing team, Lexi Green, is in the audience, and she's amazing. And she might actually do us the favor of reminding and requesting such a badge be created. So
or telling on
us. or getting me in trouble for bringing it up in the first place. All right, so I'm scanning through question. I think we've hit all the questions, and we're at time anyway. Mark, is there anything you want to throw in to kind of summarize things as to what all this stuff means for the community?
Don't give up. Continue to believe in yourself. Continue to work on your writing. Continue to work at the passion and the things that drive you to want to share stories with the world. The trends will come and go. If you're not seeing a trend that's working for you right now, don't worry. Stick around. Kind of like we say in certain parts of Canada, if you don't like the weather, stick around a couple hours. It'll change.
Yeah.
So, stick it out for the long run, because yes, we're looking at trends for Q1, but when you look at the long-term trends, a couple things we're continuing to see ebook growth in general. We're continuing to see global growth in general, and we're continuing to see indie authors rocking it like the rock stars that they are.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty inspiring. I'm watching this. I've been watching this business for years. From the inside and the outside, and it's pretty inspiring to see how things are shaping up and shifting. All right, well, that's going to wrap us up for this week's Self-Publishing Insiders. I almost said something completely different. I do too many podcasts is what that means.
Gonna wrap it up for Cooking Nightly with Kevin Tomlinson.
I won't go there. But if you would like to continue to hear more of these sorts of insights or see the current insight-filled blog post, go to ddd.tips/insight. That leads to a landing page where all these are going to be collected. Bookmark that, because then you can come back and check that stuff. And you can also see, like, when we make little predictions, you can come back and ridicule us when we get things wrong. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. I should have asked this several times throughout, because that always seems to get a good reaction. But make sure you're liking and subscribing on whatever platform you're on, YouTube, Facebook, whatever podcast platform you listen to. Make sure you're checking us out, and you want to go to where did it go? Sorry, sometimes these things disappear on me, but make sure you bookmark d2dlive.com, because that's where we'll count down to each week's episode with the topics and everything. You can also find links to past episodes so that you can kind of go check us out on the blog there. But that's going to wrap us up, Mark. And for everyone paying attention, thank you so much for being a part of this industry insight stuff. We'd have no insights if there was no industry. You folks are the industry. So thank you for being a part of this amazing community of authors and publishers as we grow, as you grow. Mark, thank you for being our Sherpa in this mountain of data. And everyone else, we'll see you all next time.